Hello, my name is Gloria. Today, we shall be discussing the topic Nervous System. Nervous System. Objectives of lesson. As the lesson progresses, the learners should be able to 1. Define coordination. 2. Mention the two parts of the nervous system. 3. Enumerate the two parts of the central nervous system. 4. State the three parts of the brain and their functions. 5. Mention the location of the spinal cord in the body and its parts. And number 6. Mention at least one function of the spinal cord. What is coordination? Coordination is the process by which every part in the body of an animal work together to bring about the proper functioning of that organism. Coordination is important because no metabolic process such as respiration, digestion, muscular and skeletal movement and so on can function on their own, but they depend on one another for effectiveness. Coordination process is controlled in animals by two systems, namely the endocrine system and the nervous system. So the two systems that control coordinations are endocrine system and nervous system. Now let's look at the nervous system. The nervous system receives stimulus, transmits the impulse of the stimulus to the brain for interpretation, and stimulates proper response. The nervous system is divided into two parts, namely 1. The central nervous system, 2. The peripheral nervous system. So the nervous system is divided into central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. In this lesson, we shall be focusing on central nervous system. You can simply call it CNS. The central nervous system is responsible for coordinating internal and external impulses and sending them to relevant parts of the body for appropriate actions. The central nervous system is divided into 1. The brain, 2. The spinal cord. So the two parts of the central nervous system are the brain and the spinal cord. The brain is located inside the skull, while the spinal cord is located inside the vertebral column, also known as spinal column. So let's discuss them one after the other. And so we are starting by looking at, the brain. The brain is the central information processing organ of the body, and it controls every processes that take place in the body. The brain is located inside a bony structure called the skull. So the skull and the meninges. The meninges is an inner membrane filled with cerebrospinal fluid. This protects the brain from mechanical injury and reduces shock respectively. The brain is divided into three parts, namely 1. The forebrain, 2. The midbrain, and 3. The hindbrain. So the three parts of the brain are forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain. Looking at the forebrain, this is the largest part of the brain. It is made up of 4 different parts, namely 1. Cerebrum, 2. Thalamus, 3. Hypothalamus, and 4. Olfactory lobe. We want to discuss the function of each of these parts one after the other, and so we are starting by looking at cerebrum. The cerebrum controls every voluntary actions that we have control over or actions that we can do at will. Those are called voluntary actions. It is the seat of intelligence, thinking, reasoning, memory, judgment, imagination, and so on. Cerebrum also controls emotions such as sadness, happiness, and so on. It's also responsible for coordinating impulses around the body. The second part is the thalamus. The thalamus controls body sensation, consciousness, awareness. It's also responsible for passing impulses to the cerebral cortex. Hypothalamus, as seen from the image, is below the thalamus. Its functions include controlling appetite or feeding, It controls sleep or alertness, controls osmoregulation, and of course body temperature. And the last part is the olfactory lobe. This cannot be easily seen by looking at the image. Why? It is located at the back of the brain, and so it's not obvious. Now this part receives sensory impulse of smell, simply meaning that it controls smell. Note: the cerebrum is the largest part of the brain. It is folded or said to be convoluted in order to increase the surface area. The outer surface of the cerebrum is the cerebral cortex, and it is the most active site of the brain. Now the cerebrum is divided into two hemispheres separated by the medial fissure. So the cerebrum is divided into the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. These are separated by the medial fissure. Now the corpus callosum allows the two hemispheres to communicate with each other, allowing information being processed by one side of the brain to be shared with the other side. Each cerebral hemisphere is further divided into four. The first one is the frontal lobe, located at the front, and from this image it is colored red. The second part is the parietal lobe at the top, and it's colored blue. The third part is the temporal lobe at the side, colored brown, and the last part at the back is the occipital lobe, colored green. So take your time, look at this image, study the image, and locate all the parts that are mentioned. So let's go back. I want to talk about the second part of the brain, and that is the midbrain. The midbrain is a very short part of the brain. It links the fore and the hindbrain together. It's made up of three different parts known as 1. Optic lobe, the optic lobe, 2. Pineal gland, and then the third one is the pituitary gland. So looking at the functions of each, optic lobe, this receives sensory impulse of sight, so it's the part of the brain that controls vision or seeing. The second part is known as the pineal gland. This secretes hormone known as melatonin. And the last part is pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is found at the midbrain. It secretes tropic hormone and other hormones such as prolactin, oxytocin, and so on. So let's look at the image here. It's showing the location of the pineal gland, pituitary gland. Optic lobe is not easily seen, but it's there. Okay, number 3, hindbrain. The hindbrain is also known as the brainstem. It's made up of 3 different parts: the cerebellum, the pons varolii, and the medulla oblongata. Looking at the functions of all of these, we start by looking at cerebellum. The cerebellum controls posture, balance, involuntary muscular responses, and also receives impulses from the semicircular canal and the skin, meaning that the cerebellum and the semicircular canal of the ear are responsible for controlling balancing. Number 2, we have the pons. Can also call it pons, no problem. This is the part that connects the lateral cerebellar hemispheres together. So the cerebellum can also be divided into 2 halves. The first one is called the right hemisphere, and the second one is called the left hemisphere. So the pons varolii is responsible for connecting them together. The last part of the hindbrain is the medulla oblongata. This controls all involuntary actions that cannot be done at will, actions that we don't have control over, such as sweating, sneezing, swallowing, breathing, heartbeat, and of course blood pressure. So the medulla oblongata regulates blood pressure. I love the name medulla oblongata. It sounds nice. So look at this image and study all the parts that make up the hindbrain. Here is the image showing the longitudinal section of the human brain. As students, of course as teachers too, we need to know how to draw this image and label properly. The first thing is to know all the parts that make up the brain, the forebrain, the midbrain, and the hindbrain, that you can be able to slot in all the parts. I wish you good luck on that. Alright, let's move on. The second part of the central nervous system is the spinal cord. Don't forget that the spinal cord is an extension of the medulla oblongata of the brain. From the image we saw earlier, you can see the long tissue connected to the brain and going down. It is cylindrical and it runs along the neural canal of the vertebral column. Now, the vertebral column and a 3-layered membrane known as meninges protects the spinal cord. So the function of the vertebral column is to protect the spinal cord. The spinal canal is a space at the center of the spinal cord filled with cerebrospinal fluid, and that is where the spinal cord runs through. The spinal cord has a H-shaped gray matter surrounded by the white matter. When you see the image, you will understand better. So let's move on. Transverse structure of the spinal cord. If you look at the center, you see the H-shaped image there. That is the gray matter. Every other part surrounding that is called the white matter. So that should be the first 2 points or 2 parts you can or should be able to label when you're asked to draw the spinal cord. Looking at the functions of the spinal cord, number 1 is that it coordinates all reflex or involuntary actions in the body. The action that we needed to respond to fast so that we don't have accident or our body parts are not damaged, those actions are being controlled by, the spinal cord. The second function of the spinal cord is that it transmits impulse from the spinal nerve to the brain. So here shows the structure, and of course you should be able to draw and label. So take note of the part. We have the central canal, which is the whole, we can call it the central part of the spinal cord. We have the gray matter, we have the white matter, we have the dorsal ganglion, we have the sensory nerves, which takes impulse from the sense organs to the skin, of course, and other parts to the spinal cord. And of course, the upper part is called the dorsal part, while the lower part of the spinal cord is called the ventral part. Wow! So that is the end of our class on central nervous system. When next we meet, we are going to be discussing peripheral nervous system. So here we have the students' activities, 10 beautiful questions from this lesson for you to attempt. So go get your book and your pen and start digging it. Now don't forget, if you're not able to answer any of them, you don't need to panic. If you're able to answer all, good luck. If you're not able to answer all, say good luck to you. Now if you're not able to answer all, go back to the video, watch it again, download it, and do anything that you know can help you to retain, because this is actually to help you to master this lesson and get better grade or be able to answer any questions on the central nervous system. So this is the answer to the student activity. So start marking your book. Our goal here is for you to have 10 over 10. You can simply call it 100%. That is our goal. Now if you are new to this YouTube channel, please subscribe, click the notification button, thumb up, drop your comments, like it, anything you can do just to promote. Now don't forget, learning is fun, so biology is fun. Thank you for joining me in this class. Have a wonderful time. Bye bye.